Hi guys. Are these your seats? You moved?
Hey, Stu, you're a college graduate. Don't listen to your mother.
Level playing.
Are they going to do?
Come entertain me, Alan.
Mind your way.
Look at all these camcorders. I think were the worst thing ever invented.
Guys!
All right, Hi, Rosalind. Yeah.
One more.
You are. No, none of
Thank
my.
you.
No, no, no.
Okay. Exploded right into my face. I didn't want to do it. You gotta keep the wire thing on.
Liz.
Not that bad. Great.
Rob?
Liz.
Kyle.
Totally stunned me because I thought it was
us pray. O God, you have made us the creatures of time, so that every tomorrow is an unknown country and every decision a venture of faith. Grant us, frail children of the day, who are ignorant of our own future, to move toward it with a sure confidence in your love, from which neither life nor death can separate us. Amen. Please be seated. Distinguished guests and members of the Board of Trustees, colleagues of the faculty, administration, and staff at Kenyon, friends and families of the graduates, and above all, this especially fortunate class, the class of 1992, welcome to these 164th commencement exercises at Kenyon College. Welcome first to all of you who waited for us here. Some of you arriving with the dews of morning to get the best seats. Waiting for the academic procession to form, to make its way through Marriott Park, down Middle Path, to this historic memory spot, shaded by venerable trees, framed by the stones of Samuel Mather and Ascension Halls, a place where Kenyon people have gathered for generations, weather permitting, on commencement day. And welcome also marchers to this place. Graduates first, the long black line in the lead, faculty next in bright academic plumage, and in the place of highest honor in the academy, you know the last are first, accompanied by dignitaries, the distinguished guests who will receive honorary degrees and whose presence gives special significance to this occasion. Most of our attention this morning will focus on those who marched, on the people in academic regalia. But you who are onlookers and admirers deserve recognition as well. You Kenyon families and friends have been important to the success of our graduates and this celebration of it. Financial support, sustaining love and concern, encouragement and sharing, the right words when needed, gentle or stern, have all made the difference for the members of this class. You have come to applaud them, but first this morning let us applaud you. Will the mothers and fathers or guardians of the graduates please stand or raise a hand so that we may applaud you? Will grandmothers, grandfathers, and great-grandparents please rise or wave for our applause? Now, brothers and sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins of all degrees. Thank you all. Now this is really a family occasion. This great extended familial gathering marks the high point in the 168th academic year in the history of this college, and a point of pride and high achievement in the lives of the graduates and their families. We on stage and you in the audience know a good deal about the individual efforts, the advances and setbacks, the joys and the stresses, and the final concluding triumph in completion of their work and lives at Kenyon of each of the members of this class. Today, these personal histories give special meaning to the awarding of degrees for this class of diverse, talented, independent-minded, and liberally educated men and women. We will begin this commencement celebration by honoring our distinguished guests, who are the kind of accomplished people that we expect today's Kenyon graduates will become. They exemplify the highest order of university scholarship and teaching, the art of the theater, business leadership and civic service, psychology with a gift for healing and wholeness, and distinction in education, economics, philanthropy, and pension stewardship that has been so numerously recognized by honorary degrees that we are behind the count. These honoraries exemplify as well careers devoted to college teaching at Kenyon and a career in the arts that began here and has flourished since. We will now award the honorary degrees. E. Digby Baltzell.
E. Digby Baltzell, historian, sociologist, and distinguished chronicler of the American upper class, you have surveyed the decline in authority and leadership among the socially prominent families in the United States, much as Alexis de Tocqueville did in France a century and a half ago. Beginning this lifetime work with the book Philadelphia Gentlemen, you followed that achievement with The Protestant Establishment, widely regarded as a sociological classic. It was this book that added the acronym WASP to our vocabulary, and your biting criticism of the snobbish exclusivity of upper-class America earned you the label the Wasp with a Sting. But although your research has continued to the present day, a love of teaching always has remained at the forefront of your career. More than 55 years after enrolling at the University of Pennsylvania, you continue to teach there as the most beloved professor that university has ever known. As scholar and teacher, you have lived a career captured by a single theme, more important than ever in today's world. A society that confers privilege, but fails to foster a sense of duty in its leaders, condemns itself to a crisis of moral confidence. For your wisdom, your outstanding scholarship, and your love of teaching, today we honor you, the Philadelphia Gentlemen.
E. Digby Baltzell, you will now be presented by the Secretary of the Faculty with the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters.
Tibi praesidi collegi Kenyonensis, Func E. Digby Baltzell, ut et gradum literarum humaniorum doctoris, admitatur opero.
In nomine Dei, Amen. Republica Orioensiculisa, et constitutne Webre, nos professores collegi Kenyonensis, te ad gradum literarum humaniorum doctoris admittibus. Ibi potestatum eos nominis inter homines, doctos iorendi faculus. Salve, doctor.
For more than 30 years, your innovative scene and lighting designs have created worlds for fellow artists to inhabit. Like Shakespeare's poet, you give to airy nothing a local habitation and a name. Born in Shanghai and educated in the United States at Occidental College and the University of California at Los Angeles, you apprenticed with master designer Joe Melziner before striking out on your own extraordinarily productive international career. You have designed more than 200 productions for the stages of Broadway, off-Broadway, and most of the major regional theaters in this country. A lover of opera, you have set the stage for every major opera company in the United States, as well as many in England, Germany, and South America. You believe that dance demands the purest kind of design, and you have created that design for the dance companies of Martha Graham, Jose Limon, and Alvin Ailey, as well as for the Joffrey and for Canadian ballet companies. At the Yale University School of Drama, your talent for teaching and passion for your art have helped form another generation working in theaters all over the world. Artist and teacher of artists whose distinctive sculptural environments revolutionized 20th century scene design, Kenyon is proud to welcome and honor you.
You will now be presented by the Secretary of the Faculty with the degree of Doctor of Fine Arts honoris causa.
Tibi, praesidi collegi Kenyonensis, hunc Ming Cho Lee, ut ad gradum artium elegantium doctoris, honoris causa, admitator opera.
In nomine Dei, Amen. Alpha nobis a Republica Ovium Citumissa, et conspitudine veterae, nos professores Alise Kenyonensis, ea gradum artium elegantium doctoris, honoris causa admittum. Ibi potestatem eius nominis inter homines doctos gerendi faculum. Salve, doctor. Burnell R. Robert.
In the world of business, where the dynamic tensions between tradition and progress often seem irresolvable, you have consistently found ways to weave the challenges of the new into the understandings of the proven. I just went to work, you said once. I've never had any great belief as to where I was going to go. An uncommon curiosity seems to chart that direction, leading you to decisions that more timid souls would avoid. You are a paper maker, someone said, who long ago embraced paperless communication. The timber, farm, and the outline database equally capture your attention. But much more than process or product, it is people who attract your primary regard. With the genuine affection you have helped others discover their strengths as you engage them in the collective enterprise. Your sense of inquiry and concern has directed you and your corporate family into spirited community involvement beyond the paler notion of civic duty. While your life makes abundant room for family, for good work, for the pleasures of art, at Kenyon today we honor you also for values related to education. A graduate of the University of Wisconsin and a holder of an advanced degree from Harvard University, you have a need to learn that draws you to colleges and universities, where you sit as trustee, and especially to Kenyon, whose chairmanship you held from 1988 until just this spring. Our successes owe much to your curiosity, your affection, your good instincts, and we delight to celebrate you today.
Burnell R. Roberts, you will now be presented by the Secretary of the Faculty for the degree of Doctor of Laws.
Tibi, praesidi collegi Kenyonensis, hunc Burnell R. Roberts, ut ad gradum legum doctoris, admitator opera.
In nomine Dei, Amen. Auscultare nobis a Republica Orion Signisa, et constitutne veterae, nos professores collegii Kenyonensis, te ad gradum legum doctoris admittimus. Tibi potestatem eos nominis inter homines doctos garendi factum. Salve, doctor. And Wilson Shake.
Healer, consultant, author, and self-styled recovering psychotherapist. Since your first book, Women's Reality, you have become a leader in the understanding of addiction and recovery. Your later books challenge us to live with sanity and joy, to explore our individual worlds as exciting new places, where old prejudices and discredited thinking need have no place. Unnecessary dependence, as you tell us in your book, When Society Becomes an Addict, makes us live in a universe that has many holes. It is in living our own process, you tell us, that we take our place in the universe, and the whole system can then heal. Your Meditations for Women Who Do Too Much, also useful for men who do too much, reminds us, in the words of Norma Jean Harris, a favorite character of yours, that mothers, so finely tuned is their guilt, can be counted on in almost every instance to hold up the pillars of any crumbling institution on an hour's notice. For your courage in proclaiming that many emperors have no clothes, and for substituting individuals for empires, Kenyon honors you with this degree.
And Wilson Shake, you will now be presented by the Secretary of the Faculty the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters.
Ivi, praesidi collegi Kenyonensis, Hanc Anne Wilson Shea, ut ad gradum literarum humaniorum doctoris amitator operum.
In nomine Dei, Amen. Auscultare nobis a Republica Orion Signisa, et constitutne veterae, nos professores collegii Kenyonensis, te ad gradum literarum humaniorum doctoris admittimus. Tibi potestatem eos nominis inter homines doctos garendi factum. Salve, Doctor. Clifton R. Wharton, Jr.
Most people hope for distinction in one profession. You have achieved it in 4. As an educator nurtured by Harvard University, which you entered at the age of 16, you rose to become president of Michigan State University and then chancellor of the State University of New York. As an economist trained at the University of Chicago, you rose to become deputy chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. As a philanthropist, shaped by field work in Latin America and Southeast Asia, and selected as the first winner of the Presidential Freedom from Hunger Award, you rose to become chairman of the Rockefeller Foundation. As a man of business, eager to serve colleagues and country, you rose to become chairman of the Teachers Insurance and Annuity Association and the College Retirement Equities Fund, the largest private pension fund in the United States. Your career has been marked by breadth, intensity, and the high calling of a commitment to stewardship. 50 colleges and universities have preceded Kenyon in honoring you. In Scripture, the number 7 represents perfection. Kenyon honors itself by honoring you with perfection squared plus 2.
Jr., you will now be presented by the Secretary of the Faculty for the degree of Doctor of Laws.
Tibi, Praesidi Collegii Kenyonensis, Hunc Clifton R. Wharton Jr., ut ad gradum legum doctoris, admitator opera.
In nomine Dei, Amen.
Autoritatis nobis Republica Orient Civilisa, et constitutne veterae, nos professores collegii Kenyonensis te ad gradum legum doctoris admittimus. Tibi potestatum eius nominis inter homines doctos garendi faculum. Salve.
We will now honor 3 persons with long and close ties to this college who have shaped our history and character, 2 faculty members who retire at the end of this year, and the alumnus who is our commencement speaker. Robert D. Burns.
The relationship has to be strong if you're going to make it work. The words you spoke about your role in the Big Brother program tell much of your approach to other parts of your life in this community for 3 decades, as teacher, researcher, colleague, and friend. The intense and caring relationships you formed with students at Kenyon led them to experience your own excitement with biology and to explore for themselves what constitutes life on Earth. Your dissertation in animal behavior was among the first in a newly organized field, and you brought to Gambia research interests that enriched yourself and your students. Your class presentations delivered with characteristic wit, your research guidance demanding challenge and creativity, you embodied the synergism between teaching and research. Perhaps most influential were trips out of the lab, where, in the setting of wood or marsh, you shared the poet's advice, let nature be your teacher. You have contributed to the community in numberless other ways through the years, not just at Kenyon, but beyond, where in 1987 you were named Knox County Big Brother of the Year. Today we can express only a small measure of our gratitude for your service, your friendship, your example.
Presented by the Secretary of the Faculty for the degree of Doctor of Science honoris causa.
Tibi, Praesidi Collegii Kenyonensis, Hunc Robert David Burns, ut ad gradum scientiarum doctoris honoris causa, admitator opera.
In nomine Dei, Amen. Autoritatis nobis Republica Orient Civilisa, et constitutne veterae, nos professores collegii Kenyonensis te ad gradum scientiarum doctoris honoris causa admittimus. Tibi potestatum eius nominis inter homines doctos gerendi faculum. Salve.
irreverent, rebel, literary agent provocateur. You have animated countless students to embrace literature and life with ardor, nonconformity, and discernment. Challenging complacency in its many guises, you have supported and implemented programs for discovering new ways to live and learn in the academy and in the world. An early Kenyan advocate of international education, you directed the Great Lakes Colleges Association's Middle East program in Beirut, and later, the Sweetbriar College program in Paris. You were among those who inspired and who later directed the integrated program in humane studies. As chair of the Department of Modern Foreign Languages and Literatures, you were instrumental in the adoption in 1980 of the Kenyon Intensive Language Model, KILLM, and in the creation of the course, The Image of Woman, European Cross-Currents. Throughout your career, you have been an advocate for civil rights and progressive causes, a protester against tyranny's binding human freedom. In a 1983 article on Camus, you affirmed that in action taken in common against dehumanizing circumstances, there is hope that degradation can be transformed into dignity, solitary existence into fraternity. Students and colleagues, saddened at your leaving, are enriched by your gift of Dionysian delight, Promethean fire.
Robert H. Goodhand, you will now be presented by the Secretary of the Faculty with the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters.
Tibi, praesidi collegi Kenyonensis, hunc Robert Harrington Goodhand, ut ad gradum literarum humaniorum, doctoris admitatur opera.
In nomine Dei, amen. Autoritatem nobis, a Republica Orion Sequisa, et constitutne veterae, nos professores collegii Kenyonensis, te ad gradum literarum humaniorum doctoris admittimus. Tibi potestatum eos nominis inter homines doctos garendi facultas. Salve, doctor.
Murray L. Forward.
It ain't misbehaving exactly that you engaged in, although some of your more priggish professors at Kenyon may have thought it was, especially those who were skewered by the parody of the Impromptu Players, that improvisational comedy group you helped found here. What it was, exactly, was the irreverent, unruly, and irrepressible antics of a budding comedic genius and certifiable clown. The liberal arts prepared you for a range of careers. Unconventional research during your senior year took you to clown school in Florida, and you graduated from Kenyon into 3 years with the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. From Jim Michaels' playwriting course, you became the originator and co-author of Ain't Misbehavin', based on the music of Fats Waller in one of the longest-running musicals in Broadway history. From the Kenyon stage, you proceeded to acting roles in television, movies, and your own one-person show, An Evening of Shalom Aleichem, as well as directing assignments for stage and television. From general manager of Kenyon's tiny radio station, you eventually moved to National Public Radio, where you are currently winning awards as the Director of Cultural Programming. From Pierce Hall to Carnegie Hall, and at many points in between, you have generously and energetically shared your manifold talents. Looks like misbehaving sometimes, but it's really art.
Now be presented by the Secretary of the Faculty for the degree of Doctor of Fine Arts, honoris causa.
Tibi, praesidic colegi Kenyonensis, nunc Murray L. Horowitz, ut ad gradum aureum elegantium doctoris, honoris causa, admittatur opera.
In nomine Dei, amen. La Repubblica Ovium Securista, et constitutne vetere, nos professores collegiae Kenyonensis, te ad gradum artium elegantium doctoris, honoris causa admittit. Tibi potestatem eius hominis inter homines doctos dorendi facultas. Salve, doctor.
In the days and hours preceding this commencement, parents have been meeting and greeting their children's friends, and within minutes, no doubt, they have all one way or another popped the big question. And what will you be doing next year? For those parents who have been squirming when the question has been put to their son or daughter, for those who have been laboring in vain to get a respectable answer to that question from their child, take courage from the parents of today's commencement speaker. 22 years ago, Dr. and Mrs. Horowitz sat where you are sitting now. And to the question, so what will Murray be doing after graduation? They responded, he's going to be a clown. And indeed he was. For 3 years, traveling around the country in the greatest show on earth. When, as a student at Kenyon, he proposed taking a leave of absence to attend clown school, there was an uproar at the faculty meeting, which from all reports made the controversial curricular debates in the 90s seem like child's play. Within a few years, parents take note, the student clown had conceived, co-authored, co-directed one of the classic works of the American musical theater. Ain't Misbehavin' won a Grammy, an Obie, Tony, and a dozen other awards. In addition to writing a number of successful plays and screenplays, in addition to directing at the New York Shakespeare Festival and being a comedy consultant for the Yale Repertory Theater, Murray Horowitz has been a director of soap operas, producer of documentaries, a television and film actor with a featured role in Kojak, and the writer, the director of a host of galas and special events, including the 90th anniversary of Carnegie Hall. Murray's brilliant one-man show, An Evening with Shalom Aleichem, has won critical acclaim all across the continent, and his recent work as Director of Cultural Programming at National Public Radio has already begun to receive wide recognition, most recently issuing in the winning of the Gold Award for his documentary about Louis Armstrong. The only disappointment in Murray's career is a disappointment of which he is unaware. Actually, it's my disappointment. About 10 years ago, being concerned that Gambier was a place in which not enough jokes were told, I began developing an elaborate fantasy about flying in Murray Horwitz from New York a few times a year to tell jokes. He would be like Johnny Appleseed, I thought. Come into town, scatter some jokes, take off. But alas, I was unable to persuade any of my colleagues, any of my fellow citizens in this village, of my scheme to levy a tax on every citizen of Gambier to finance the expense. Murray Horwitz is not here today merely to provide a few laughs, though I suspect he will do that too. Nor is he here simply to provide another occasion for his parents, who are also in the audience today, to answer the big question, different this time. He is here because, in his life's work, he has given artistic form to those same profoundly creative gifts that everyone who knows him has seen transfigure the reality that we inhabit in his presence. Whether he is on stage as the great Yiddish storyteller, or backstage getting George Burns his cigar, whether he is arguing passionately for his vision of Kenyon at an alumni meeting, or arguing passionately with himself about the new play he is writing, Murray Horwitz is always in character, because he has an imagination capacious enough to embrace a world that always feels more vital and important, that always seems more expansive and inviting as a result of his magnificent creations. Please join me in welcoming Murray Horwitz.
Thank you. When we were walking up here, or as President Jordan calls it, processing, Ron asked me if, why didn't I start off with an ad lib, and there is something that did occur to me as we were standing for Dr. Burns and Dr. Goodhand. It is especially warming and wonderful to be in a place where the true heroes get standing ovations, the faculty of the college, and they are the heroes, and we should applaud them again. Did you all see the New York Times on Tuesday? Laughter of recognition. For those of you who did not, these people were on the front page. It says here, the lead story, graduates facing worst prospects in last 2 decades. This is right underneath where it says, partly sunny, high 68. It says, when bands stop playing at college graduation ceremonies this spring, members of the class of '92 will doff caps and gowns and enter one of the toughest job markets that any class has seen in decades. We should ask the band not to stop playing today. A little later on it says, liberal arts students have the toughest scramble ahead. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate each and every one of you, members of the class of '92. I want to return to this article a little later on, but we have far more depressing things to discuss first. Before anything else, I want to thank Professor Sharp for that splendid introduction. It's an introduction that could only have been delivered by a man who had known me in a variety of embarrassing circumstances over the years. Thank you, Ron. Thanks to another old friend, my faculty host, Greg Spade, and to President Jordan and the faculty and trustees of the college for the honor they have given me. But most of all, thanks to the class of '92 for inviting me to speak to you on this day. It is an especially meaningful honor. It's an emotionally meaningful honor, and I am deeply grateful to you. I feel I must apologize. When you ask a clown to appear on the stage, you can rightly expect a couple of laughs, I think, but I must admit that I haven't felt very funny given everything that's been happening in this country over the last 2.5 weeks. I really was afraid after the verdict that maybe I didn't have anything to say to you at all. It was the kind of event that made one question everything that he was about to say. My not having anything to say has never been a problem before, but there is always a first time for everything in life. What could I say? There are certain cliches that commencement speakers can always fall back on, like the usual witty congratulations to the parents. Well, you've made it, Mom and Dad. No more $20,000 a year. But Mom and Dad really didn't have much choice, number one. And number two, since over half of you will end up in graduate schools, they got to look forward to $30,000 a year bills. So I started thinking about my own commencement in 1970. And suddenly I had an answer. I will now always feel, because you've asked me here, of course, a special kinship with the class of 1992. But there really is a strong correspondence between our two classes, the class of 1970 and the class of 92. We graduated about 3 weeks after the massacres of students at Kent State and Jackson State, and you're graduating about 3 weeks after the Rodney King verdict. One may have struck a bit closer to home than the other, but both events caught us unaware. That uniformed government officers could visit such violence on citizens, be photographed doing it, and still get away with it, was as unthinkable to you this year, I'm sure, as it was to us back then. There wasn't much a commencement speaker could say. Not even then. I remember the poor guy. I remember what he looked like, our commencement speaker. I'm sure he was fine, although I don't remember much of what he said. I remember he was the director of the Peace Corps in the Nixon administration, which is a little like being in charge of the Navy in Nebraska. He said something, I think, about working within the system to affect change. Well, I'm part of the system now, and I wish I could tell you a lot has changed in 22 years, but I can't. I think it is worth noting that it was not working within the system that has jolted the country this month, and it's to be hoped jolted the country into action. It was a failure of the system and the violence that resulted from it. The last 22 years have demonstrated that we will be endlessly creative and original in finding ways to ignore the problem. And the problem is race and increasingly class in America. Woody Guthrie was right when he sang, "Some will rob you with a six-gun, some with a fountain pen." I'm afraid my response to your confusion and rage will be every bit as unsatisfying as our commencement speaker's was to our confusion and rage. And of course, if you're not confused and enraged by the events of the last few weeks and their greater causes, then you'll probably want not to pop the corks on the champagne bottles, but just break them over your head. I called some of my classmates, and none of them could remember much about our commencement speaker either. But that's not his fault. It goes with the territory. One friend of mine said that the most memorable commencement address he had ever heard was the one where the fellow began by saying, "You're not going to remember one word of anything I say this morning." Well, I agree. You're not going to remember my speech either. And don't forget I told you. You're young, you've got weighty issues on your mind. Does the tassel go on the left? Does it go on the right? And I have more bad news for you, having to do with another cliche of commencement speeches. That's the one where the speaker tells the class that the future is yours, filled with challenges and opportunities, and doors waiting to open. Well, as one of the people sitting behind one of those doors, I'm here to tell you that we're not giving up so easy. People in power tend to fight like hell to hold on to it. Worse yet, there are more of us than there are of you. There are more people my age than there are people of your age. So I bet you're scared. Actually, the New York Times has said you're scared, so you must be. It says in that same article from Tuesday, liberal arts majors are the most fearful. And he goes on to describe a young woman who has been terrified all year and who will soon start a job that pays her an annual salary of $31,500. Well, there is lots to be afraid of, but please allow me to put you at least a little bit at ease. First of all, I think the New York Times is nuts. It's not the first time I've thought that. Several of my shows have been reviewed by the New York Times over the years. But I shouldn't shoot the messenger. Let's put it this way. If the Times is right, and you are that fearful, then you're nuts. If life is more than a sweepstakes to see who gets the best job coming out of college, then liberal arts graduates have the least to fear. You're lucky. There's much common sense and some hard data to support the contention that lucky people, that is to say those who consider themselves lucky and who are considered by other people to be lucky, are those people who have a wide range of knowledge, ability, and interest, and a willingness to put them to good use. A person who sets only one goal in life and refuses to deviate from its pursuit in any way is more likely to be disappointed in this many are called but few are chosen society than someone who is interested in a lot of things, willing to try something different, and ready to pursue promising opportunities as they arise. A liberal arts education prepares you for just this kind of activity, for being open to new things. Just think, in the next few months, many of you who have never even thought of pursuing a career in the food service industry will be working in restaurants and bars and in convenience food stores. But think about it. As long as you're working on that computer program or on your poetry or on your volunteer activity, once you get off work, it's okay. There's a second reason not to be fearful, and it's a little embarrassing. For the vast majority of you, nothing bad is going to happen. People like us are a mostly privileged lot, living in a privileged society, and while there is no limit to the evils that may befall you, there is no likelihood that many of them will. This does not mean that you are better than other people. It means you have more advantages. With such advantages come responsibilities, and by rights, confidence. The circumstances of your life are better, and you have far less to fear than, for example, Rodney King. Nor does this mean that you should be complacent. That's why, in a way, it's terrific that your prospects are so putatively dreadful. It may force you to find the thing that I most want to talk to you about today. At the beginning of the 1960s, when I grew up, insofar as I ever did, in Dayton, Ohio, John F. Kennedy was president. He used the word courage a lot. Indeed, he made it the basis of his whole campaign for the presidency. The word is terribly out of fashion nowadays, which makes sense, because when things start to disappear, the words we use to name them fall into disuse. This is a word which had better make a big comeback or we're all in trouble. Courage. Repeat it to yourself out loud at odd moments. Roll it around in your mouth until it feels good. Try to use it at least once every day, and think about Bert Lahr and the Wizard of Oz. In a few minutes, you will receive the Scarecrow's diploma, and I have no doubt that you have already or soon will hear the Tin Man's ticking. It's your courage that's in danger of going unrecognized, even by you. Maybe especially by you. Believe me, you have it in you. And believe me, too, when I tell you that it doesn't take all that much of it. When I worked on the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, I spent my days with people who jumped over each other on high wires, who turned somersaults 40 feet in the air, and who walked into cages with leopards and panthers. Circus people lack a certain component of fear that other people have, and I soon realized that I was one of them. I, too, was fearless, and not just in the face of the significant physical dangers of circus clowning. It was apparent to me that I was absolutely unafraid of making a fool of myself. As I say, it's not much. This is not a giant amount of courage we're talking here. It's a modicum of courage. It's certainly nothing compared to the courage it takes to throw a chair at a lion, or even to work the night shift at a convenience food store. But it's a kind of courage I find particularly lacking today, the courage to appear foolish. And you'll do much better if you find it. Where did I find it? It came from inside of me, to be sure, from who I am and all that my family had given me, my parents, my brothers, but it also came from what I had become, from my Kenyon education, from having an idea that there are some things in life that really are more important than others, and that at most points in life, looking foolish really doesn't matter. I might even say that if you've gone through 4 years of Kenyon and you're still afraid of making a fool of yourself, then your education has been a failure. You've often appeared foolish over the last 4 years, to yourselves and to others. You've tested yourselves in the laboratory and in the library and come up short every once in a while. That took some courage, and it's being rewarded today. Now it's time to do the same thing in a less protected environment. Let me share with you my favorite conversation of 1991. Marcus Roberts and his girlfriend came over for dinner. Now, Marcus Roberts is one of the great musicians of your generation, and also, to my mind, one of its great thinkers. He's a jazz pianist. He's best known for his work with Wynton Marsalis. Marcus was saying a lot of things, but one of the things he said is that if, as a musician, you aren't holding yourself up to the highest standards, and he mentioned names like Beethoven and Duke Ellington and Art Tatum, if you're not aspiring to that ideal or trying to express yourself through that ideal in some way, you would never know how good you are. You'll get more out of yourself if you aspire to that ideal, if you have faith in it. You may make a fool of yourself, but if you don't reach that high, you'll never know how good you can be. Worse, Marcus said, and this is much more important, I think, artists and audiences who don't set those high standards, who don't aspire to them, tend to validate their own inferior work. Well, it's not that I'm not as good as Art Tatum. I'm just different, that's all. What I'm doing is every bit as good as what Duke Ellington did. It's just a different thing. And then Marcus turned to his girlfriend and said, it's the same thing in a relationship. You'll abdicate responsibility for your own actions. Well, baby, it's not my fault. I'm okay. I'm just doing what I do. If you can't deal with it, that's your problem. It's not mine. It just takes a tiny bit of courage, a little bit of gumption, to see if you can be as good as Art Tatum, or to try to make a relationship work better than it's working, or to try to make a difference in the way people treat one another. Nothing is achieved without that, nothing great anyway, and you will be happier for having found that courage. And if you make a fool of yourself in the process, you might be lucky and end up making a living at it as I am. I haven't spoken all that much about myself, which friends and family here will instantly recognize as uncharacteristic. About 5 years after I left Kenyon, I read these words by a writer named Brendan Gill, which helped me immeasurably in getting on with the rest of my life. Young people, says Gill, hear far too much about what a serious matter life is. In fact, not a shred of evidence exists in favor of the argument that life is serious, although it is often hard and even terrible. In saying that, I am prompted to add what follows out of it, that since everything ends badly for us, in the inescapable catastrophe of death, it seems obvious that the first rule of life is to have a good time, and that the second rule of life is to hurt as few people as possible in the course of doing so. There is no third rule. I might disagree with Brendan Gill about that last part. It seems to follow naturally to me that there is a third rule, to do everything possible to assure that others are also having a good time. After all, many people who live in worse circumstances than Brendan Gill find life an excruciatingly serious matter. But his words were a breakthrough for me. In those 5 years since my graduation from Kenyon, I had worked as a circus clown, a radio newsman, a professional politician and speechwriter, and an actor. I was having a wonderful time. I didn't seem to be hurting anybody, and occasionally I might have helped some other people to enjoy themselves. And suddenly I felt much better about it all, and much less guilty for not being very serious. Since then, I've been a stage director, a Broadway playwright, and all these things that Ron Sharp has mentioned. And so you see, I too, like you, had trouble finding the right job. The truth is, it's all been exceedingly interesting and rewarding, and it no longer bothers me that it's an unconventional career. After all, nobody has ever lived my life before. Be willing and courageous enough to stay interested and challenged by a lot of things, and maybe make something out of your life that you may not have had in mind when you started out, that you may not have in mind now. Because nobody has ever lived your life before either. In fact, if you do wake up one day and find that somebody else has lived your life, I hope it's Frank Sinatra. It takes a little courage to live your own life. Not a lot of people do it nowadays. And it takes a little courage not to strive, rather, not to imitate somebody else's, or to fit into a safe category. People will try to categorize you all the time. They've already started. And if you let them, you will start to categorize yourself, and then you limit your own idea of who you are and what you can achieve. Robert Benchley said, there are two categories of people in the world, people who divide the world into two categories of people and people who don't divide the world into two categories. We live in an era of categories, of marketing and polls and surveys and a kind of focus group government even. Who knows better than you after 4 years at Kenyon what nonsense that all is? Stand up to it and you'll live a happier, saner, and more useful life, and it'll be your own life. After 4 years here, you know a little bit about what's important and a little bit about who you are. Thus, in brief, Kenyon has taught you how not to be afraid. When you grab that diploma this morning, right when you touch it, Remember that. Think courage. Kenyon is a school of history and tradition, and I must mention that this is an historic occasion. It is no doubt the first time here, and perhaps at any institution of higher learning in our country, that the person delivering the commencement address is doing so only a few yards away from the tree, over there, where 23 years before he had hanged and burned an effigy of the president of the college. It was not Dr. Jordan. And I do not mean to encourage any support for the idea. It was a man named William Goff Caples, from whom I ended up learning more than I had learned from some of my professors. He taught me my first important lessons in politics. Power, at least once, did not speak out of the barrel of a gun through the flames of an effigy. We became good friends, Dr. Caples and I, and fellow Kenyon alumni. Kenyon alumni. We are the people who lean woozily in the doorways of division parties and harangue you about how much more we drank than you drink. How much better life was back then. Welcome to our ranks. I will tell you frankly that most of the good things that have happened in my life have come from my family, who are here today, and from Kenyon College, which happily is also here today. I love them both, and I hope both are with me for a very, very long time. I do have one quick tip to pass along that you might think about some night when you're locking up a 7-Eleven, or wondering why you became a lawyer, or both. But this really is a tip, and I want you to tuck it away. And if you can remember one thing about my speech, please remember this. I have never known anybody who went to Kenyon College who disliked teaching. But this is in many ways the highest honor for a Kenyon alumnus, to speak at the college's commencement. I hope each and every one of you will be able to do this someday. In addition to all the benefits that it will bring to you, it will provide the college with commencement speakers until the year 2398. I asked one of my best friends from this place, my classmate Scott Powell, if he knew of any advice I should give you today. He sent me a fax, which probably would have amused the person who wrote what was on it. It had a quotation on it, and so now, having quoted the humorist Robert Benchley, I'll quote that other yucca-minute laugh riot, Aldous Huxley. Huxley said, "It is a little embarrassing that after 45 years of research and study, the best advice that I can give to people is to be a little kinder to each other." To which I dare to add, have courage. Of course, there are some things that you do have to be afraid of, but they are mostly things that you can control. You should be afraid of messing around with dope. You should be afraid of not fighting the galloping assault on freedom of expression in this country that's coming right for you. You should be afraid of not following Dr. Samuel Johnson's advice, always to keep your friendships in good repair, especially your Kenyon friendships. You should be afraid of not voting and leaving your fate in the hands of the 25% of eligible Americans on average who do vote. You should be afraid of not using condoms, of not reading the New York Times with a grain of salt, of not reaching high enough in your personal and professional life, of not achieving all you can achieve, of not remembering my speech, and above all, of being middle-aged Kenyon alumni, woozily haranguing young people, and going on far too long. Thank you. Congratulations.